that doesn't mean we don't want effort from artists as well, right? So, oftentimes we might get just a generic LinkedIn profile that's uploaded as a resume, and it doesn't have a lot of detail on it. And of course, we want people to put forth effort to show that they're interested in the job. But
Sure.
dealing with the software itself and applying, that's where I said it needs to be seamless. It just needs to be encouraging.
We now went through the stages. So we basically applied, we went through, we get in contact with you, maybe a back and forth, maybe we get a little bit feedback through time. So what is next in the experience structure?
The interview, of course, would be the big one, coming in for the interview. Well, I guess it's Zoom these days, right? So not my favorite. I mean, there are some positive aspects. I was just chatting with the recruiter yesterday, as I mentioned, and we were talking about sort of the pros and cons. And, I realized that at least local people, if you're hiring someone or interviewing someone and they're working, if they're coming in for an interview, they need to think about, I got travel time and I got to take this big chunk of time off work. How does that work? Zoom makes that so much easier, right? So they can just kind of pop off in a quiet room or maybe step outside, and it really shrinks the amount of time they're taking off work. And I can appreciate that, but you definitely miss something about being in person that I'm looking forward to getting back to. And part of it is just, coming in and feeling the vibe of the studio itself, right? You step into the studio, you kind of look around and you get this like really cool energy, and you're like, yeah, I can see myself working here. Versus on Zoom, you don't get that, right? It's well, at least it's very hard.
No, but that's actually a little bit of a question I kind of have for you. Like, how does it change, and how did you change the interview to kind of adjust to this change, basically?
I mean, the interview process is still the same, right? We're still, popping up we're still gathering together. The same people are involved, and it can be a little bit more awkward because there's lags and there's and you're not sitting all together. So, someone it's like, do I ask a question or does he have a question? And so those things aren't as natural as it would be if you're sitting in person. But overall, the experience is still pretty much the same. Now, I also do like it makes it easier for like sharing a person's demo reel as well on using Zoom. Where you just kind of share your screen and boom, you've got the reel and the person can talk about that reel. It's harder to do that in person. So there are definitely pros and cons, but I think overall, just coming back to the experience is, one, that communication with the recruiter in setting up the interview, right? We want to make sure that the candidate feels ready and prepared. So we always talk about, who's going to be in the interview, so they know. And maybe they want to do a little bit of LinkedIn stalking first so that they can get a sense of...
I always say it's important to have a strong LinkedIn profile. Like this is like the Facebook where before that it was Facebook. Everyone was like, okay, what he's doing, and then looking at. Nowadays it's actually more LinkedIn, I feel like.
Maybe the candidates, go on LinkedIn and they see who their interviewers are going to be, and they kind of build that little bit of connection first. And then, just making sure that they have all the links that they need. So there's a lot of that stuff that happens up front. And then with the interview itself, I make sure that, I give a nice introduction that allows the candidate time to settle in. Kind of like what we did, we don't want to just all of a sudden jump in with some questions and
let's go, bam.
Yeah. So it's about making them feel comfortable, and then ideally is leaving some time for them to ask questions, because kind of like we talked about, it's a two-way it's always a two-way conversation, right? We want to make sure that they're comfortable and have the knowledge that they need to make decisions that make sense for them and where they're at.
I would be curious, because we talked a little bit about being equal in an interview. How do you see both sides and their roles in the interview specifically? Like, what is because everyone has a specific responsibility. You expect someone from the other side, that he answers and gives you clarity, for example, maybe. That's the thing. And you have your responsibility. For example, I told you, like, as a podcaster here, my responsibility is to being a commentator. I'm someone who drives the episode and gets this thing going. So, and there's of course the content comes a lot from you, for example, in a sense. So what is in your sense when you sit down with someone, maybe you are in a group, what is the roles that you kind of define for yourself, and then you expect a little bit from the other side, basically?
I guess one thing I don't expect from, and I would even say don't want from the candidate, is to drive the flow of the interview. I've had that happen.
It happens. How does it look like?
It's frustrating for us on our side, because we're not getting the questions that we want to ask. It does show that maybe the person's engaged and they just are very curious. So one of the things I do is, at the beginning of the interview, I always try to set the agenda. It's like, okay, first I'm gonna give you a little bit of an introduction, then you can introduce yourself, we'll ask some questions, then we can talk about the role and answer any questions that you have. And I make sure that they understand. Does that sound good? They're like, yeah, that sounds great. And then we move forward. It gives the candidate an understanding of the flow of the interview, so they know what to expect, right? Because I think that's probably the biggest thing for a candidate stepping in an interview is what should I expect as part of this conversation. In some instances, it could be perceived that person is challenging to work with, because the supervisor or the lead's going to go and try and talk to them, and then they're just going to go off, and it's hard to manage them, and so it just, it always needs to be a balance of conversation, where if I'm asking a person a question, they're not giving me the shortest answer possible, and they're not going off on this tangent for half the interview, but really they're just thinking about the compact question, making sure they're answering the question and providing the detail necessary.
We align a lot of things. It's the same thing with us, for example, as like I like ask questions or push some topics, and then of course it would be bad if you say like, stop. And it would be also kind of bad if you start to go like Neverlands, basically. So it is that's the same thing. So I kind of can relate to that situation. One of my favorite stories
is we had this one interview, and it was via telephone. So back in the day, so we had the call on speakerphone. And we started off the interview, and this person, they just went off, and they just started talking and talking and talking, and something happened, and we lost the call. It dropped out on our end, and I'm also like scrambling, trying to call them back. We called them back. We reconnected, and they were still talking, as if nothing had happened. So unaware of like the surroundings, right? Of the interaction with the individuals, and just all about in your head, right? So
yes,
we had such a laugh at that one. I felt bad, but it was still funny.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show.